So recording has started. This is Presta, the ambassador of FUD, here with Hogeman, the president of all things. Hoge. Oh, stop talking. My shit's not working. Hang on. I'm sorry. Okay, test. Say something.
Test.
Okay, now it's picking up. Let me start over. Presta, ambassador of FUD, Hogeman, president of all things, Hoge, and central point of contact for any issues, IT department, and HR. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, so to clarify my position in the project, I bought in fairly early on for a fairly small amount at that time, and what is still seen as a somewhat small amount compared to the people holding right now. So I have been working on the NFT web server and smart contracts since then, along with advising on technological matters and helping partnerships. So if we want to be clear about like power roles here, I've had a mod position for a long time. I helped set up the Discord with the help of DNSK. I should say I asked him to, and he did it. I didn't really help set it up. At the same time, I have been transferred ownership of the Telegram, and I have a vote on the smart contract multi-sig. So
Okay, stop there.
Yeah.
A vote on the smart contract multisig. Elaborate, please.
So every time you deploy a smart contract and the Hoge token operates within a smart contract, the smart contract has an owner, and the owner can make transactions to it. They can call functions on it, functions that nobody else except the owner can. And so this is a point of centralized risk concern, because if one person owns that and there's some vulnerability in the contract, then they have the ability to tank the whole project. So there are multiple ways of dealing with that. One is to get a third-party audit to show that there are no vulnerabilities in the contract, and if there are, you can either transfer ownership to the null contract, which would be like the dead address in Ethereum, or you can move it to a multi-sig of trusted community members if you think there is a reason to keep making transactions. And right now, for Hoge, that reason is to exclude or include centralized exchanges that we are working with.
Okay.
I was going to just ramble a little more and say I think the direction we're moving is that we want nobody to own that, because after a few more exchanges, there will be no reason to have ownership or control. So we'll just transfer it to the burn address. That's what I think will happen. I mean, I can't say anything for certain.
So among the people that are included in that list of people that have, I guess, a voting role, there's you and I assume a handful of other people. That would be what we refer to as core. Is that appropriate or no?
Yeah, so the core decision-making team has been the most consistent in contributing members around that have, put in a lot of money and are trying to make it. So there are 3 members that have access to the smart contract. It's me, Weiser, and Waso right now. That changed from Marp and Mesh. I think it was Mesh. Yeah, it was Mesh.
Okay.
The reason for that is when the association was formed, the board of the association could not be in control of the smart contract in any way.
Cool. I'm not going to ask too much about the association because that's a topic that's broader than my understanding or scope, right. And I don't want you to have to sit there talking about it. But, okay, cool. So we have the sort of framework laid for who the core is and who the decision makers are. Those are 2 different sets, one is a subset of the other, you'd say?
Yeah, yep. Okay. So there's, I'd say 8 decision makers, and 3 of them are voters on the smart contract.
Okay. So would you say that it is incorrect of me to assume that, considering that your name is Hogeman, you would be sort of the top of that food chain among those 3, or do you still find that there's a sort of a parity in role among the core generally and among the 3 voters?
Oh yeah, no, we're all independent actors. Nobody controls anybody, nobody pays anybody, and we all have strong opinions. So Great. They certainly don't listen to me.
Okay, cool. So, this conversation started because of something that's linked on the Hoge.finance, and you're going to hear me typing really slowly because I have a laptop between me and my keyboard with a bunch of other stuff that is more interesting to me on it. But I'm going to pull the website up into the, you can't see this, but into my recording, and I'm going to go to somewhere on here has the liquidity locks. So we're going to get into this, and I know that I want to talk about reasons why these conversations tend to spiral into people kind of freaking out, and how we can sort of mitigate that issue. But also, first of all, so in 22 days, as of today, which is 5/9/21, somewhere around $2.2 million of liquidity is unlocking. That's literally as much as I can say with the certainty of what's provided to me on the website. Now, before we talk about what's going to happen when that happens, I'd like to talk about what it is to have liquidity locked, where that liquidity is locked, why people would lock liquidity, and why there is a specific time frame that is unimpeachable for which that liquidity will stay locked, I guess. So maybe even first, when we say the word liquidity, what do we mean in sort of broad terms?
Yeah, so when you launch your own coin or token and you want to use it on a decentralized exchange, you have to provide liquidity so that people can trade on that decentralized exchange. So right now, liquidity is always provided in pairs for Uniswap, and that pair for Hoge is Hoge and Ethereum.
Okay, right. So when you say you have to provide liquidity, this is saying you have to provide an exchange some sum of Hoge that they can use to sell. Is that appropriate?
Both Hoge and Ethereum.
Okay. So that
'Cause
purchases and sales can happen.
yes, exactly. So you can either buy or you can sell it.
Okay. And that liquidity is provided by whom?
Originally, it's the developer will deposit, just going to make up a number, like 10 Ethereum to the smart contract. And when the contract is created, it assigns itself. Originally, it was 1 trillion Hoge. 500 billion of that was transferred to the burn address, and 500 billion of that was transferred to Uniswap along with the 10 Ethereum. Again, 10 may not be the exact number, but you can go look it up. It's like the first transaction for the Hoge smart contract.
Okay. Okay, so we got that liquidity. We've got that sum of Ethereum and of Hoge that was put into, say, we'll take an exchange. Safe to say, we'll take an exchange like Uniswap is an exchange that holds Ethereum and Hoge for the explicit purpose of transferring money between those two currencies, right? So,
Right.
go ahead.
When you provide liquidity to Uniswap, it gives you back what are called LP tokens, liquidity pool tokens. And you hold those as a receipt to say, I can pool my liquidity out at any time I want. So it's like depositing to a bank. You say, I'm going to give the bank this money, and then they're going to go do their trading and their debts and their, whatever they do as a bank. And then whenever I need that money back, I have a receipt saying I deposited it. Please give me my money back. And the same is true of Uniswap.
Okay, so I think we're at the point now where we can talk specifically about I pasted the URL here, but the locks that are showing up from, again, they're linked from the website. So this is, very public stuff. I want to make sure that we address what each of these records mean in this list and sort of what the expiration of those locks to you mean to the project. And I have some editorialization that I think I can provide for that. But so each of these, so we see 855,925, 66,399, 933,057, and so on, all unlocking in 22 days. Some proportion of these locks that are expiring in 22 days are representative of that initial pump of liquidity into an exchange, or is that wrong?
Yeah, so just a little bit of context about what you're looking at. So Uniswap found that people were deploying tokens and adding liquidity. However, because if you are the person that deploys it and holds the receipt, you can pull out essentially all the money at any time if you are the initial deployer and other people don't come and deploy more liquidity. So they developed a third-party service called Unicrypt. And what Unicrypt does is it lets you take that LP token, that receipt, and lock it up for a certain time. So you literally give it to a third party and you say, I'm going to promise not to access this for 6 months or a year or 5 years. And in doing so, I am encouraging growth in the project because people can always then trade with my token while it's locked. So it's a trust encouraging thing.
Okay. So then it's fair to say that what we're looking at here only represents liquidity on Uniswap.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to sound like an idiot for the first time in my life. So Uniswap, so there's no analog to this for a Whitebit. Is that, or is Whitebit represented here? How do we parse that? So Uniswap versus Whitebit versus Big One, etc.
Yeah, so Unicrypt only locks LP tokens. So anything you get from a decentralized exchange. So that means Whiteswap or Uniswap. I was thinking of 1inch, but I think 1inch is no, they do. They provide you LP tokens. But so a decentralized exchange is very different from a centralized exchange. The Uniswap is just a smart contract that runs on the Ethereum blockchain. Anybody can use it, and it's by and large unmanaged. What Uniswap, the company, does is they manage the front end and the fees that they get back from the smart contracts so that they can keep developing more smart contracts that encourage DeFi growth.
Okay. So ultimately, again, what we're looking at here is locks. Okay, so then I guess no, I'm wrong about that. So this liquidity staking. So there's only one place that you can stake liquidity on Hoge, and that is Unicrypt. Is that appropriate?
By staking, do you mean locking?
Locking. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So again, some distribution among these 12 odd records for in 22 days represent that initial pulse of money from the formation of the smart contract. I guess maybe that's not the right way to say that, but that came from the developers, was put into Unicrypt. The rest of this represents other people putting their own Hoge, in this case, into Unicrypt, locking that liquidity, which allows, which does what to the price, which does what to the stability of the price, and what is the advantage of locking liquidity from the perspective of Hoge, and then what is the advantage of locking liquidity from the perspective of the person that locks that liquidity?
So the more liquidity you have in Uniswap, the more stable the price is.
Across all exchanges?
Just across Uniswap.
Okay.
If it happens on other exchanges, that's merely because of arbitrage and market forces.
Okay. So then the other side of that coin, the advantage for the person who's thinking about locking their liquidity.
Right. So if you provide liquidity to Uniswap, what you want, you make the most in fees. So the return is they pay you a percentage of every transaction. So you will make the most in fees if the price moves sideways and does not go up and down. So it encourages people to lock more and more money because that will stabilize the price just by the mechanisms of the algorithm that calculates the trading price.
Okay. And from what I understand, just from chatter on Telegram, which I'm not smart enough to understand how this shit works. I'm not an economist I'm not smart, is when the price goes up, apparently the sum of Hoge that will be provided back to you when your liquidity unlocks decreases. Can you explain how that mechanism works?
Yeah. So the LP token, the receipt of your deposited amount, guarantees you a percentage of the current liquidity pool when you pull it out. And so what that means is if you have 10% of the pool when you put it in, let's say it's 10 Hoge and 10 Ethereum, and someone buys up like the Hoge side a lot, it goes to 1 Hoge and 19 Ethereum. Well, then the price of Hoge is actually extremely high. It's like 19 Ethereum per Hoge. But you only get 10% of that liquidity pool, which means you pull out, if you were to redeem your receipt, you would get 1.9 Ethereum and 0.1 Hoge back.
Okay.
So that would be less than if you just held your Hoge originally. That's called impermanent loss.
Okay. But by and large, you've come out far ahead of what you were before you. If you had just, well, no, in this case, you would have made far more money if you had kept your Hoge, I guess.
Well, you would have far more in valuation, but then to sell that off, you would be moving
Yes.
the price back towards the original point.
Yes. Okay. So this is something that I think we're going to come back to in a second.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a little
but
confusing.
yeah. So um, going back to that initial statement, right? So some large proportion, which I don't know if this isn't even necessarily important, but if we could say that that initial sum is reflected in one of these entries, not that it matters, but ultimately what we see here that all unlocks in 22 days is 2.2x million dollars worth of Hoge is divided across that initial investment from the developers plus whatever was locked. I keep saying staked. I know that's not the right word, but whatever was locked by the community throughout, I guess, the course of the start of the contract to today, or whenever Uniswap started, or Unicrypt started allowing liquidity locks on Hoge. So I guess my first question is why, and I think I know the answer to this, but why are there so many records here, or why is there such a high sum of money all unlocking in 22 days?
Well, originally it was a very low sum of money.
Right.
Right? It was the developers. I mean, I'm guessing what happened here because I wasn't there, but you can see that the developers initially deployed it, added liquidity, took those LP tokens to Unicrypt and locked them, and there was more than one person that did this. So as the value of the project grew, their share of the LP tokens is the same, but the valuation of those LP tokens is now very large.
Okay.
So
So
why it's all happening is because they deployed the project and then they transferred it to the community to see how far it would grow.
yeah, but I guess to answer the other question, the reason why it all happens in 22 days is because that there was some arbitrary 1 month period or something from the initiation of that um,
Yeah,
liquidity
it was
locking.
4 months.
Okay.
I mean, it was February to June.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it started way back. So did this was this a feature from the very beginning of the project?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now the question, we got $2.2 million coming out. So here's where I really fucked up in that conversation is I started throwing around very rough bullshit numbers um, to try and pinpoint, or not even pinpoint, to try and roughly estimate what would happen if all this stuff unlocked in 22 days and was suddenly sold, or that Hoge was suddenly sold by the people who hold the liquidity that's locked. So what I was
Right.
saying is, as we were watching the price tick up in this last pump, and I want to say that I know part of the reason why this ruffled so many feathers is I started talking about this and the price started dropping. But I really don't think that was because of me. I think if that were because of me, then I need to spend a lot more time in Telegram because I can affect the price a lot more than I thought I could. But so what I was saying is, so we saw a 9 Ethereum. This is what I said. This is really stupid. I was really tired. I'm going to blame it on that. But we saw a 9 Ethereum sale, and that basically flatlined the price growth for like 10 minutes or something. And I said, okay, well, if 9 Ethereum gets sold, and then the price flatlines for like 10 minutes or whatever, then what happens when 60 Ethereum are sold, which would be about 10% of the $2 million when it unlocks? And I said, well, that would definitely crash the price. So what I want to hear first, I guess, is your perspective of how much of an existential threat the unlocking of this liquidity is, and then sort of the reasons why you think it is or isn't a threat, and then I'll give you the reasons why I think it is or isn't a threat, or the sort of processes that could be done to mitigate that threat.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I just wanted to say, we've had plenty of people that sell off 40 Ethereum, 50, 60 Ethereum, and just in the course of this project, and it really isn't like a cratering event. I mean, people notice, but by and large, our community is not sitting around hitting refresh on DEX tools. And the people that we have attracted recently to the project are not the kind that just, quickly dump everything and try to run to the next meme coin. That's what I've heard from conversations, and that's what I've seen in the price chart. It's just not a big deal as people make it out. Why do I think this is or isn't an existential threat? So Hoge is on many centralized exchanges now. I guess many counts as 3. But that's an important feature because it means there will always be a market for your Hoge. If this unlocks and they redeem their LP tokens, and the wallets then have their X Hoge and their X Ethereum, however much it is, I should say Y Ethereum. At that point, the price in Uniswap becomes less stable. The price doesn't go down when they pull out their LP tokens. The price stays the same. But each sale or purchase will move the price point more than it did in the past. So it is not a concern that they will pull out like $1 million and then sell $1 million worth of Hoge, thus cratering the price, because they cannot redeem $1 million worth of Hoge. They can only redeem what is available in the liquidity pool multiplied by the Uniswap's algorithm, and the price impact, since they pulled out their liquidity, will be very high.
Right.
So instead of $1 million, it would look more like $100,000. Even though the valuation is very high at the current price point, you cannot actually liquefy that. And it's the same on the stock market. You say, give me my 401k back. And they say, well, this was the price we were able to sell it for, because you just can't turn around and purchase it like apples or sell it like Apple.
Right. That makes sense. And that's a good, that may kill the whole theory that this is a threat at all.
Yeah, so Uniswap becomes less stable. And we like Uniswap being stable because it is the most reliable trading post, right? It will always quote you a price, and it's always up. If you go to Big One, you have to look at the order book and play against other people in the market, whereas in Uniswap, you're playing against yourself.
Right. Okay. So in this situation, all this liquidity is unlocked. People try to go sell it. Suddenly, there is no liquidity on Uniswap to make a transaction.
Well, so the liquidity will always have liquidity. They just can't get out their valuation worth.
Right.
Because the way the algorithm works is the more you ask towards the total amount of, like, say, let's say it's got like 10 ETH in there. If you try to, it doesn't matter how many Hoge you try to sell, you will only approach that 10 ETH. You can never buy it out completely.
Right. So this is a circumstance where just the people who have that liquidity pull out and try to sell, and they can't. So that's right. One aspect that I think you've definitely sufficiently explained away. So the concern that I was more sort of pitching was what happens when everyone else. This is sort of a two-pronged thing here. So what happens when everyone else, when it's 2 days out, and people who haven't heard what you've just said, and I think from my DMs and Telegram, I can tell you a lot of people haven't heard what you just said, panic, and they sell. And then also, what happens when this liquidity is suddenly drained from Uniswap and no one can buy or sell Hoge for some period of time? And I say this because, and this is maybe completely, a fabricated situation, but when GME started running really hard and Robinhood stopped the purchase of GME and it only had one direction to go and it crashed, that was blamed on a liquidity issue. So I just want to hear your take of sort of, first of all, when people start seeing that this is about to expire and start to freak out, what's your suggested, and this isn't necessarily your spot, you're not in marketing or whatever, but what's your suggested way to stop that from happening? And number two, how are we making sure that sufficient liquidity exists for sales in the, say, like, I don't know, say some Elon Musk head or something came in with 10 grand and wanted to buy 10 grand, and 5 of those people came, and they wanted to buy 50 grand worth, and then 10 of those people came, or whatever happened at some specific time when that liquidity didn't exist.
Let's not confuse a centralized exchange liquidity with a decentralized exchange liquidity.
I'm definitely confusing those things.
The centralized exchange, they hold enough liquidity to cover the accounts that have decided to trade there. So let's say I want to trade on the stock market. I give my bank $10, and they're going to be my stock, broker for. I don't even think broker is the right word, but you know what I'm trying to say. They're my investment account for the stock exchange.
Yep, your brokerage.
Yes, my brokerage. So when I go to make deals, I expect that at any point, if I want to pull my $10 out, I can. And there are many regulations on how many dollars they have to have on hand to cover the total number of users and the total amount of dollars that have been deposited. And so they don't always have the full valuation. Banks don't carry around all the money that has been deposited to them. Similarly, brokerage firms don't either. They work on debt and promises. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a way to improve trading frequency. And so when you go to a decentralized exchange, it's very different. So we deposit pairs like Hoge and Ethereum, right? And that Hoge and Ethereum will never run out because you cannot purchase all of one side or the other. So there will always be a price at which you can buy more Hoge.
Okay.
As long as there is some liquidity in there. It could be one of each.
Right. Okay. Well, I think you've explained it.
Yeah. I mean.
So let me walk through one more thing. Sorry, before we. So this is definitely not any official correspondence that this came from, but someone said along the lines that only 20% of this liquidity needs to be covered or something. Is that something that you've heard or that you've said before? Not that I'm trying to.
That doesn't. I've never heard that.
Okay, cool. I thought, because I didn't understand how that would work, but whatever. Okay, so our fear that this liquidity is going to destabilize the price, you would say, is unfounded? Destabilize. Go ahead.
It will destabilize the price. Like if they pull this out and they dump it, they don't even have to dump it. As long as they pull those LP tokens out, it will destabilize the price. So every time you try to buy more, the price impact will be higher. And that's okay. I mean, we have many players in the market now. You can think of it like this is a trading economy with many markets. So Whitebit is a market, Big One is a market, Bilaxy and Uniswap are all markets. And some of them are more stable than others because some of them have more participants or more sophisticated players. And some of them just are kind of small players. Like 1 inch is a little small for Hoge right now. They don't have a lot. And so when you go to purchase Hoge, it's going to have a larger price impact over them.
Right.
But when the price point moves on one of these markets, you have an opportunity to purchase it cheaper somewhere else and then sell it on that market, right?
Yep. That's exactly what I was going to ask. Okay, cool. So your worst case scenario is people just move out of Uniswap into a different exchange and arbitrage the coin against Uniswap.
Yeah, I mean that happens just constantly. Yep. And Ethereum gas fees are kind of keeping it from moving too fast right now because you got to pay a lot if you want to move this around.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about gas fees a little bit in a more technical sense, but assuming you still have time, time check here, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is, so we've talked about how liquidity pools work generally. Now, we saw a situation last week where suddenly Uniswap switched to their V3 from the Coinbase browser, and I think I suspect this only affected people who are using Coinbase wallet to manage their Hoge. But my question is, I guess we've sort of figured out that the solution for that was just modifying the URL there to point to the V2. But how pressing, in your opinion, is it that a liquidity pool is hydrated for Uniswap V3 instead of V2? Are we broadly considering shifting the focus over to V3? Is that something that's important?
I was looking into it, and initially I thought it was going to be a big deal that we had to just run over there. I also thought that the tokens would auto migrate, but that didn't happen. So the thing about Uniswap v3 is the LP pools work differently. When you deposit LP tokens, you choose a price range in which your LP tokens will earn fees for you. Otherwise, that liquidity is not available. And you can imagine that because we were talking earlier, if the price doesn't change very much, you're making the most in fees. So there's an incentive to provide a narrow range for your LP tokens to earn you fees. And, it basically narrows the total trading range of your asset because people aren't going to put, $0 to $1 million as, where I want to earn fees because they could potentially lose out from the impermanent loss we were talking about earlier.
Right.
So even if we were to convince all of these liquidity pool holders to migrate to V3, which they can't because it's locked right now and Unicrypt hasn't deployed their locking migration function yet. Even if we were to convince them, we would still have to hassle with, well, what do we think is a good price target for Hoj? And what are your boundaries going to be for making that liquidity available? So now there's in V3, there's tiers of liquidity where if you're in a certain price range, there may be more. And if you fall outside that price range, there may be less.
Yeah.
It's
So
not a very
if it wasn't hard enough to
one.
explain this to somebody considering doing this in the first place, they just made it a little bit harder. Sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. So without going into it seems like we're all kind of still learning about the specifics of this V3 thing. Generally speaking, it's certainly safe for everyone to keep locking in V2, and it's definitely the path for now until we understand V3 a little bit better. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I'd say we let the market explore it a little and we can move over if we see a need.
Cool. Okay, and so, man, where do we want to go next? So, man, well, you kind of crushed my liquidity unlocking 3 points of solution. So this is where I really got shafted. I don't want to just bitch about Telegram, but I was just about to talk about. So I was going through these 3 points of what could happen when this liquidity unlocks, which ultimately were all inconsequential compared to what apparently will happen. But the third point was okay, we'll have this community effort to add to this big liquidity pool, and then it'll solve the problem. And then I got muted. So, but whatever. It's just funny.
Yeah, well, I will say this that we saw this coming 4 months ago, and one of the goals has always been to move it onto central exchanges, so that even if these decentralized exchanges, Uniswap, dies and they pull out their liquidity and it disappears, that we, the community, still have a place to go and trade.
Mm-hmm.
Uniswap is not the entire project,
Right.
although it is a great DeFi tool. Great for bootstrapping new startups. It's important to us that you always have a place to buy and sell your Hoj, and that's what the central exchanges provide.
Yeah, but there are analogs to Uniswap.
Yeah.
Okay. So so this is a question. This is a question that I don't understand the intricacies of broadly. So I'm going to go through how this works in the first place. But basically, from what I understand, and I want you to correct me when I'm wrong, because I'm going to be. From what I understand, if you store your Hoj on an exchange, so I guess there's some mechanism for which you can sign up for an exchange, purchase on that exchange, and keep them in that exchange. From what I understand, right now, if you do that, you have something roughly analogous to if you buy Dogecoin on Robinhood, where you don't actually own the token, you own a proportion of the broader liquidity, I guess would be the word, that exists within that exchange. I say that because from my own experience, when I look at the holder data, and I've had this brought up to me by a user named Herself, I think, in Discord, that person's wallet was not showing up in my list, and that's because they're holding it in one of these exchanges, right? So
Right.
These exchanges only provide you a representation of their own liquidity, I think. Is that correct?
So it is my understanding, and I did not dig into like the regulations and whatnot, that the exchange must have enough Hoj to cover all of your withdrawals and all of their users' withdrawals.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I'm not speculating on whether or not those people will be able to get their money out. I'm saying more those people, from what I understand, right now, don't get redistribution if they're storing or if they're holding on the exchange. Is that correct?
right. Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to think a little bit about the structure of a wallet is just an interface to the blockchain. So really, MetaMask doesn't hold your tokens, and they're not sent to your computer. They're moved around on the blockchain, and MetaMask will report what is in your account because you have the private key to peek inside that wallet and make transactions. So when you send tokens to Whitebit, you send it to their address on the blockchain, and they credit those to your internal Whitebit account. So those tokens, again, are not moved to Whitebit's wallet, quote unquote, their computers. Instead, they're just attributed to Whitebit on the blockchain, and Whitebit says, okay, I will then grant you X amount in our internal system, and you can go and trade and play. And if you want to pull out, then I will move them from my blockchain wallet to your account.
Right. And from what I understand, and this could be false because I haven't done any of this, but from what I understand, if you do that and you hold that Hoj on an exchange, you are not subject to the same fee structure when you move so effectively it's cheaper to swing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because they're not making transactions on the blockchain.
So there's no transaction fee.
That's right. Well, no, sorry. Whitebit takes a fee for every trade you make.
But
It's
like
like
something small.
0.1% or something.
Right. Yeah. So not talking
Yeah,
we're not talking about it's not subject to the gas fees of Ethereum.
yeah, that's correct.
Right. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about something that's been brought up in fact, I think by someone in one of the AMAs was talking about the idea that Whitebit is going to forego redistribution and instead allow the redistribution that would otherwise go to Whitebit to go to users. So the users, and first of all, true or false?
So when we first signed up with Whitebit, we didn't discuss redistribution at all.
Okay.
Over time, we didn't even understand like the include exclude functions. But over time, it became obvious that they didn't want to deal with it because it was messing up their accounting system because they were trying to calculate the total number of tokens that had been deposited and how many belongs to each user. And instead, they were getting a different number than the total sum that has been deposited because they're getting a reflection token. So they came back to us and they were like, well, we don't really want to deal with this.
Okay, reflection tokens.
Redistribution reflection is the same thing.
Okay.
And they said, we don't want to deal with this. And we said, okay, well, at approximately the same week, we tested out the include exclude function and we found out, oh, we can exclude you from redistribution. Would you like us to run this on your wallet? And they were like, yes, please.
Okay, so when that's done and they have been excluded and because they don't want to deal with redistribution, that the wallets I'm sorry, so because that wallet is excluded, the holders, the users of that exchange that are holding their Hoj in that exchange continue to not get redistribution, correct?
They never got it.
And
Like
they
the
still
holders,
will not.
yeah, the holders in Whitebit never get it. The holders in Big One never get it. The
Good.
holders in BTEX never get it.
Yeah, that makes sense. There was some confusion this morning, or 20 minutes before I called you, on Telegram where I asked for questions, and somebody named something Duck something had a question about that, and
Yeah,
to get to my next, go ahead.
It's a huge pain in the ass for them to deal with because they've developed a whole financial accounting system, and we're basically manipulating the numbers on one end.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, so the next thing is a little spicier that I want to talk about, and this has to do with sort of what I just described. So there was a question that came up in the Telegram, and someone who I think, at least in theory, is a moderator there, had an answer, and it wasn't what you just said. So I think part of the reason why I wanted to have this call in the first place was to try and express to the people who will watch this, not necessarily to you, because I know you have all kinds of other shit you're working on, but that I think it would make sense. I think that on the concept of fear, uncertainty, and doubt generally, I think that, first of all, admonishing someone for having fear, uncertainty, or doubt about a project that is, a Wild West sort of project that a lot of people don't understand a lot of things about, and that you would admit, I think, freely that there are some things that you don't necessarily completely grasp, which is fine. I think fear and uncertainty and doubt are totally commonplace things to come with something like that. And the way that, I guess, the best counterbalance to fear, uncertainty, and doubt is to have a solid set of answers for the questions that have answers. So what I want to express is that I think that a lot of the panic that happens in these different channels of discussion are generated by people who, with a good conscience, believe they should have an answer to a question that they probably shouldn't even have the answer to because they aren't on the part of the team that would have the answer to those questions. And there's a panic that sets in within themselves that then sort of metastasizes into this ball of fear and silencing and stop people and quit it. And I think it would be really useful if there was some kind of like method for translating questions that are broad and very answerable and maybe have been answered in the past to the mod teams of these various channels so that they are equipped to handle questions that seem really tough, right? So there isn't an answer like 20% of the locked liquidity is accounted for, or only 20% needs to be accounted for, which is a platitude that doesn't mean anything and makes no sense in the context of the framework of locked liquidity. So that's why I guess I bring up, I think that when people ask questions that are hard to answer, there is a utility there that people need to respect and use as an opportunity to answer questions that are going. I mean, the sorts of things like what I'm asking, I think, are very common and aren't hard to answer. But as more people, especially people who know something about crypto, or especially people who don't know anything about crypto, join the project, these questions are going to come up more and more, and having an answer for them is really important. So I would encourage you, and this isn't a question you can answer, but I would encourage you or someone on the, closer to the core to try and make an effort to have some kind of information sharing with the mod teams on these various channels in a way that they can collect questions, you can provide answers, and they can just have a boilerplate response that solves problems before they turn into someone making, things spinning out of control. But that's the editorializing that I referenced before.
Yeah, it's difficult because you want your community to be informed and participating, but you wonder who really has the important knowledge and who really has the important access to get you the answer that is true. Certainly, Google will answer your questions. Most of what I do.
Certainly.
If you want to reach out to, if you have these locked liquidity questions, I'd say a good place to ask them is on the forum Hoge Nation, the nation.hoge.finance. There it's a lot slower and you won't get imperfect answers because eventually someone who knows what they're talking about on the core team will come around and at least, proofread or double check what's been posted before.
That's great advice.
It's hard to, it's hard to have someone always available on hand. And so another idea would be just to have Combat with these ready-made answers. What is liquidity? Why does it matter?
Yeah, I think, man, having some kind of, because a lot of these questions that I'm seeing even are just very trivial, how does crypto work questions that could be Googled, but they can't be Googled in the context of Hoge, and that's good that they can't, because the whole point of Hoge is that it's this sort of groundbreaking thing, right? So that's the idea. And I think what happened, something that I said that I think kind of twisted the thing is something that I really, well, I don't know if I should bring it up, but it kind of bothers me how sometimes the sentiment sort of turns into something along the lines of the rhetoric that you'd hear from something like a multi-level marketing kind of ploy, where it's just how many people have got their grandmas in, and that's just not I don't think that's the sustainable approach or even necessary to see this thing flourish, to aggressively recruit in such a way. I think this thing stands on its own. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you have these kinds of zero sum game through Uniswap, it becomes a very toxic mentality, because you're looking at that like everyone who sells ruins my valuation,
right.
right? Everyone who buys increases my valuation, and it just encourages like greed and negative aspects of humanity. But instead, what will really make the project flourish is when you build value. And to some people, that means use cases. So, like getting Hoj accepted at stores. To some people, that means providing entertainment or increasing the value of the community itself through collaboration. I mean, some people, it means solving a very specific crypto problem like gas fees. So there's a lot to explore and build upon. And if you only watch the price and try and calculate like what's going to be the best exit point, you end up in a very negative mentality.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when I was mountain biking yesterday, and I was I've been poisoning my brain with Hoj thoughts through all of my other hobbies, but I was thinking about like what would the real cost be to organize a group like for a corporation, right? So like between HR fees and all this other, you know, externalized cost, what would it cost to organize a group of people like have been organized around this cryptocurrency? Like,
Yeah.
the price of the thing should be reflecting, in theory, it would reflect the value or the experience of the group, and it would be far higher than it is right now. In my opinion, it's undervalued just in that context. But that's a very esoteric way to think about pricing for a cryptocurrency.
Yeah. At some point, you need adoption for it to grow. And at some point, you need economy, you need trades for it to grow. Right.
Yeah,
So it's interesting as a hybrid asset. It can be a currency, or it can be a store of value, or it can be a community where you get to do something you never got to do before. And
yeah,
so I really push on the last part because we have someone who's building L2 XDAI tools for Hoj just because he wanted to see it happen and no one was really doing it. And he was like, "Ah, screw it, I'll just Google it and learn myself." And so that's a life experience where like something real comes out of it. He's learning, he's growing, and you just wouldn't get that without the community being around to support
yeah. And I think I said this. This is like really like flowery bullshit language to say, but I think that um, that the price of the coin and a certain not right now, probably not right now because it's not a very mature project. It's only a few months old or whatever. But I think that the price of the coin can sort of be seen as a proxy for the value of those things, right? So like the value of somebody. I don't know if you're familiar with the user Durandal in Telegram,
you.
but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, man, have you seen what he's working on? Have you seen his code base?
I have not seen his code base. I think I saw an architecture.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really he's so the issue, I've I've been working with this sort of holder data in this very like rough, low resolution way, and he's through a couple conversations with him, he's like, oh well, it's not you're not pulling this kind of data because of this, and you're not seeing redistribution because of this. Well, why don't I write a Python API that interrogates the blockchain itself at the block level and pulls pricing data at any point in time, right? And this is something
Mhm.
that doesn't, as far as I understand, and I've looked a lot for something like this, doesn't exist. Even within the APIs that are like the most popular crypto APIs don't do this. So like there's people in this community that under the badge of Hoj are creating these sorts of data tools and like data products that just don't exist elsewhere. And like that's, I mean, it's not really worth anything, but it is worth something, right? So
Yeah, it's real value comes when you can make changes in people's lives, towards a positive direction.
right.
And for some people, that's trading risk for reward and getting, a quick X dollars. For some people, it's a long-term investment because they believe in the direction and growth of the project. And for others, it's just operating within the economic space that we've created.
Right. Okay, so that's all the hard questions that were going to be gotchas, that were going to melt the price with a wave of my finger. So my finger is finished waving. Yeah, my medallion has been stored away until the next time I need to lower the price and buy up some more. But so I do have a couple questions that are just related to the projects, that I'm working on. And just for context, like, I'm not a data scientist. I have a master's degree in GIS. It's not. I mean, it's like database maintenance basically. But
Cool.
yeah, so I'm working on some things. Not some things. I'm working on a thing that you've seen me. You've seen my pitch maybe talking about like a whale hunting tool, and that's really just to garner interest in just the broader things that can be provided by holder data. I don't really care that much about the whale watching aspect. I think it's possible for sure, but I don't think it's necessarily even the most interesting part. I think that there exists enough information out there to put together a pretty clear picture of the stability of the project over time using holder data, and I think that's something that I'm kind of working on trying to figure out if I can pinpoint that in like this sort of theoretical space. But and really a huge issue with what I'm working on is that these exchange wallets, all these holders are collapsed under an exchange wallet that hold on exchanges. So I can't see their wallet information in any block of time. So that's a huge challenge. But I think I haven't really dug into that too much. But the question that I have, and this is really it's has nothing to do with the price of the thing or anything else. It's just a curiosity. But if you open the spreadsheet that I sent, and you don't even have to do this, I'll just tell you. There's an exchange on the spreadsheet that just popped up. That exchange is called like BitTX or something. It doesn't even matter what the name of it is. It's a website that is just some cryptic website that holds 0.09 Hoj total. My question is, yeah, it's really weird. So I think I sent it to the Discord. I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but basically, when I talked to you about remember when Big One was coming out, and I showed you that there was some exchange with some weird name.
Yeah.
So this is like analogous to that, but this is just another one of those cases.
Okay.
But my question is like, from your perspective, and you may not know the answer to this because this isn't really, you don't work for, what is it, Ether, whatever that website is, Dex Tools or whatever. But or Etherscan, yeah. So is it the case that any exchange can just get on is there not some formal process for which an exchange grants liquidity to Hoj?
No.
Okay.
Anyone can go buy, and that includes any third party. It could be an exchange, it could be a person. If they want it, they can go buy it up. Simple as that.
Okay. Well, just for we're gonna.
I mean, if you're talking about getting Hoj onto exchanges, that's different.
Well, this is what I think I'm talking about. So the exchange, I'm gonna paste. Well, I'll just tell you the name. I'm gonna Google it here. The exchange is named. Where is it? Letters HIT BTC space 2. HIT BTC 2. And as of right now, that exchange owns 0.090537 Hoj.
Why does it own a fraction of Hoj?
Isn't that bizarre?
Very.
Yeah. So I'll send you this. This is the URL for the.
And before you think that the exchange is taking any action, someone could have just sent it to them.
Okay. So yeah, that's more what I'm asking is like, what are the mechanisms through which an exchange could be listed on our holder list?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at their wallets and then send them some Hoj, then it'll be recorded. You don't even have to send it to like an Ethereum address as long as it's not rejected.
Okay.
Then it'll just show up in the holder list.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, cool. So last question, and comes from I was driving 2.5 hours back home from mountain biking last night through the beautiful Cascade Mountains, and I was thinking about Hoge.
I wonder.
So I wonder, and this could be really stupid, but I pitched this in Telegram. I didn't get any traction because people are all pissed off at me there. No, I'm just joking. I don't. So I wonder if there is a way to look at some correlation between the number of new users. So what got me thinking about this is this pump that we're experiencing right now, and this is absolute FUD. So slap my wrist for this, for what I'm about to say. But this pump that's happening right now exists at a time when there have only been about 4,000 new users added to our project as of this is all coming from 2 days ago when I looked. But I think there probably is a way to tease out the a rank score for how organic a pump is, and how organic being a proxy for once this thing pumped is going to stay at the high water mark, based on how many people have been added to the project. Because if there are only 3 new users and all of a sudden it pumps, that's an inorganic price action. That's somebody buying a shitload. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It sounds a lot like you want to predict the price, or
Not necessarily. I more want to predict, or yeah, I guess so. I want to understand why these pumps are happening, and target one to say. And this is obviously this leads to, oh, how can I make money off of this fact? But I'm really less interested in that. I haven't sold any. You've sold more than I have. I've looked. But
you can't tell people that. I sold it for the NFTs.
Yeah, I'm joking. But yeah, so I don't know. I just think so. So what I'm saying, I guess more broadly, is there's utility to be found in holder data that goes beyond the scope of just, oh, there's 50,000 X holders, which even that number is, sort of with an asterisk. But
right.
Yeah, I think. Good.
One thing you could easily tease out is what are automated trades and what are human trades. Because the automated trades, generally in the crypto sphere, they're front-running bots, or they're moving from coin to coin based on price action. And so DEX tools, if you buy the pro version, will help you filter through all of that and tell you who is automated and who is not.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so that's nice, because one of the big pumps we were having after Big One, before all the other meme coins got pumped, I remember there was 40 and 50 ETH buys into Hoge. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is a wallet that has $5 million in it, that threw a little bit of money in Hoge, and the price is going up and it's starting to get attention, but I bet it's going to move on to other coins. And sure enough, by Sunday, it had dumped Hoge and it had gone into Shiba and Akita.
Yeah.
And it dumped 100 Ethereum into Shiba, and that was their big pump, and that got them started. And these kind of bots just kind of roll all over the altcoin trading system.
Yeah, so I think, and that's interesting that you say that, because there was a comment made in either Telegram or Discord, I can't remember which, but someone said something to the effect of, I bet when Ethereum starts to stabilize, people will sell Ethereum and use that unlocked liquidity to buy Hoge, use that money to buy Hoge. And they said that immediately, I don't know, a day before this pump started, and that's exactly, seemingly exactly what happened. There was a brief, moment of Ethereum stabilizing, and then Hoge pumped. So yeah, I wonder how much, and I know that this is certainly running into the space of bannable territory when you start talking about identifying inorganic price growth through bots. But I mean, shit, it seems like It seems like if I'm going to get traction from people, interest in like stopping people from swing trading this thing really hard, people probably wouldn't be too precious about bots being killed, right?
So bots are part of the ecosystem. You're never going to get rid of them, and any attempt you make to remove them from the equation will lower the overall market for your asset.
Explain that.
So, let's say I went to the New York Stock Exchange and I said, okay, no more automated trading. The entire New York Stock Exchange is automated
Well,
trading.
no. So that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting pricing them out
How
inorganically. So
how would you price?
you would organize a purchase or a set of purchases that would inorganically inflate the price of the coin after a bot has sold, and prevent the economics from shaking out in such a way that they stand to gain much from a swing.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's hard too
Of
because
course, it's
one, you're
hard.
trying to coordinate market movements, and two, they have a lot of money to spend on gas fees. Like
Yeah,
if they're throwing $200,000 into a trade, they're not going to sneeze at throwing 1,000 into the gas fees to have their transactions mined first, and they've already calculated it all out. Like that's why the bot wins.
but don't you understand how good this community is?
I
Oh, you're
mean,
right. Well,
yeah.
cool, man. Yeah, that. Yeah. Well, anyway,
I hope that helps.
no, man, it
Maybe
definitely
you can
helps.
condense it.
Sorry, I'm gonna let you talk.
As I said, maybe you can condense it. I know we rambled a bit.
No, I'm just gonna put it out, I think. But also, so we didn't come back to one thing you mentioned. There was a term you used that I have in my notes somewhere. Oh, on the Discord. No, wrong screen. Hang on. So you said information walls. Do you want to elaborate on what you were referring to with information? This was before we started recording, but
Yeah, speaking of fear, uncertainty, doubt, there's a tendency to want to verify the truth of everything that either the core team is saying or the mods are saying. And of course, the big selling point of the blockchain is that all transactions are public. However, what I've noticed is that it is impossible to remove all doubts, just like the cynical retreat into what about this or what about that. Like, so with the blockchain, you can always create more wallets. So it's what if the core team has another wallet that they're secretly running transactions through? Moreover, there are entities that act as information walls. So if you make a transaction that goes to Whitebit and then it comes out from Whitebit, you can't tell what happened inside of Whitebit. So that's another way that those transactions are opaque to you. So it becomes very hard past a certain point to verify with absolute truth what has happened. And so I see a lot of the uncertainty in our community as coming from, we should be able to see this on the blockchain, post your wallet. But the truth is, there's always a way around it. And I don't want people to be concerned that, we aren't doing everything we can to be transparent.
yeah, I think that makes sense. I think my response to that would be there's a utility in fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And in absence, if there was a perfect vacuum with no fear, uncertainty, or doubt surrounding a, uh, I don't want to say the word shitcoin, that's rude. But there should be some fear and uncertainty and doubt here. If there weren't, then, there's no fear, uncertainty, or doubt in, let's say, like Tupperware sales, right? No one's uncertain about that, or what are those like makeup MLMs, right? I, you don't want this to start looking like a multi-level marketing scheme. And even me saying that sounds like someone who's participating in a. But when I'm sure you've experienced this as well. But when you start describing what you're working on to your wife, and she's just like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" This sounds like you're trying to, or you don't want to tell your friends about it because you're like, yeah, I don't, this is something I'm involved in.
You buy in, I'll get rich. What?
Exactly, yeah. So you don't want that to be like the context for which people become initially exposed to At least I don't think so. And that's not something that I'm suggesting that should be policed at all. But I'm saying, like, I think from the perspective of users and mods and holders and whoever the hell, this thing's gonna take off due to projects and hobbies and cool stuff people are making. It's not going to take off on the back of convincing. If it did take off just on the back of people convincing other people to buy into it, then God knows I would have sold from the beginning. If I didn't trust
Yeah,
that wasn't the case.
yeah, that would be illegal. It would be illegal to run a project where the main point is to get more people to buy in. It is illegal in like every country, and it is horribly unethical. Like that is the Ponzi scheme, and this is not that.
Right.
Although we have all purchased the same crypto asset, what we do is participate as a community to support each other. We do not participate as a community to sell the token.
Right. And we should not speak in terms that portray us as being people that are interested in making money off of
Exactly,
selling the token. Right?
and that's exactly why the Hoge Association board cannot manage the smart contract, because the smart contract indirectly controls the token.
Right. So one
Even
last.
though even though there are no vulnerabilities and you can't make more and you can't remove them from circulation, we can very slightly affect the tokenomics when we exclude these exchanges. And so if you are a nonprofit association, you cannot run that.
Right. So the last question I had when I was driving and hardly lucid and staring at the road last night.
Good pump. Good pump from mountain bike.
Dude, it's the best sport. Um, so as far as, I mean, I guess there's a couple questions here, but like, as far as your how subject you are to the scrutiny of um, outside legal entities, or you being the group you. So like, what are some things that you face as far as auditing or things like that from outside? Um, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess countries for one thing, but also just like, I guess what's the utility that you find in doxing yourself? What do you think the implications are surrounding doxing yourself like you have? What scrutiny are you subject to that required, or were you required to do? You weren't required to do so, I assume, but just talk to me about the logic behind doxing yourself and the core team doxing themselves, and what scrutiny is involved with that.
So if we are going to make business transactions with American exchanges, they want to know that, like, the exchange itself wants to know who are the most powerful players in this ecosystem. And I don't mean to say we're better than anyone, but we have a lot of trust of the community, so we are de facto, um, you know, saying things that matter and being paid attention to more than we would like. So in that interest, we said, okay, we will then stand in as the people that are teaching you how to bring Hoj to your exchange. And for that, we need to be public entities. Like, we need to be known. On top of that, the regulatory status of the token, I cannot comment on. I know we have a lawyer that's working on it, and because it's an unmanaged crypto asset, it falls into a new area.
Was a lawyer involved in the decision to dox yourselves?
Um, I don't think so. I think the exchange just asked, and we said, well, we might as well tell the community
The
as
exchange
well.
asked.
Because, yeah,
Okay.
and
An
so we might
existing
as well tell.
exchange or a future exchange?
I can't say
Okay,
anymore.
gotcha. Don't want to make you.
But
Go
yeah,
ahead.
every exchange we talk to, they expect there to exist a team that is running this whole project, and so we find it easiest, instead of trying to tell them how a decentralized autonomous organization works, we just say, okay, we will be the team with the most trust that the community will listen to when we tell them about your exchange. Like that's all it is.
Yeah. So one thing that I think would be really useful, and I think I've definitely received like pushback against this. There are people in the community that that believe in a much more anarchic approach to managing a group like this. But I think that what you're describing is flirting with an org chart anyway. I think,
Yeah.
why not just put together some codified org chart that would give, first of all, I mean, I don't know how many social media places have moderators, but I assume there's a shitload of moderators in this community that probably at least a few of them see this as just a headless automaton that they are being tasked with managing the communications around, which is just an insane level of responsibility for someone who doesn't really have the context that certainly I would want if I were a mod. So what do you think about putting together an org chart? Is that something that has been on the docket for you guys, or is there one that exists that people just like myself just don't know about?
That was where we started originally. We put together like all the people that were doing what and gave them titles and roles and tried to collect it. And we got about halfway through publishing it before we realized that if we were going to have the nonprofit, then we can't actually have an org chart because we're all community members. Instead, we need to rethink how we structure this because it's not a traditional structure. It's like, okay, I have the keys to the Telegram, but someone else has the keys to the Discord, and neither of us can like speak to actually printing more tokens. So we're involved in this project, but we're not in control of this project. It's truly like this amalgamous community effort. But I think we can certainly work a little harder for clearer communication channels to get people to, collaborate in a better way and get the answers to the questions they have.
Yeah. So maybe there's a way to walk that tightrope, and at least, again, I'm more just speaking to. I think if there is any possibility that the things that I say in Telegram can affect the price of the coin, which I'm totally willing to, I'm totally willing to accept that burden for. But I think if that's the case, and we're operating under that assumption, then certainly we should be operating under the assumption that the answers provided by the moderators also have a commensurate amount of price impact. Which, I mean, of course, this is all silly, but I think we need to make sure that they have at least avenues to get the answers to the questions that are not just Googleable. Because, as I said, I think a lot of this shit's not just Googleable. So
Yeah, a lot of what I see is soft power, right? As soon as we codify it, it becomes shitty and people start looking for exploits. And people do that anyway through social engineering. They're like, how can I climb the ladder in Hoge and take control of this project? Or how can I like increase my holding? But certainly it would be better if we made people aware of the impact they have on the people around them. It's super significant when you go in there and you're like yelling at some person who's fudding but doesn't really know about it, and you start swearing at them, and then you ban them, right?
yeah, but again, I want to say that if I were in the position of moderating I mean, especially Telegram is so freaking like hectic, just like it's drinking
Yes.
from a fire hose. And if you're, I mean, I panic just looking at it as a person who's not even commenting. So like, I am compassionate for the fact that these moderators, I mean, it's a lot to manage, and they're being tasked with something that, especially if if you're of a certain mindset, you could start to be like, oh shit, I need to be tamping this down. I need to be making sure that I'm responsible for this, especially if you're saying Prest is killing the price. Well, shit, what do you think
Oh,
that you're
yeah.
doing? Like what burden are you putting on yourself? So I think those people could use. I would want to make sure that they're helped in so far as they have avenues to access answers to questions that are, even if they're insignificant and Googleable, that are answered in the context of Hoge. So that's what I'll leave you with, is just like, that's what I would encourage. Not necessarily you to coordinate, because I know you got a lot on your plate. I'm sure everybody has a lot on their plate, but it seems like
Yeah.
a lot of these
My
things can be
goal for
answered.
just real quick, my goal for that was we would have a community congress where all of the leaders could get together in the same way you would have like a Democratic or Republican Congress. And then you could collaboratively decide on what your mod standards are, what your responsibilities are, and like where that ends. It's very important that you have like hard lines on my responsibility ends here. Either it's, 8 o'clock at night, or it's I will not ban people, I will only give them mutes, or I don't have to answer any questions about liquidity. Like go to the website. things like that. And I would want people to come up with it on their own because I'm not here to be your boss. I don't want to tell you how to run a community.
I got bad news, man. Your name is Hogeman. You've brought
I
some of
know,
this on yourself.
I know, I did this to myself.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, cool. I guess well, I know I've said last question a few times. It's not 1 o'clock, so or I guess what 3 o'clock there, 4 o'clock. So if you got to
4 o'clock, yep.
um, but I would ask like, how did you end up? So I know not a lot, but I know a few natural science PhDs. How'd you end up doing software development, or is that something that started the opposite direction?
Oh, just always been writing it. I mean, yeah, I mean, I had a job in college doing software. I was teaching myself from the, teach yourself C in 21 days O'Reilly books way back when. And it's just the most reliable industry. Like science is hard to break into. You kind of have to be the 4.0 top rated student with lots of grants if you want to succeed. And software is like, oh, you can write code? Sure. Go ahead
Yeah.
and do that.
Are you working on like NOAA grants or something?
What
Never
am I
mind.
on right now?
I don't want to ask that question. That was rude.
No, I'm on startup money, NSF career grant money, and I think it's Research Foundation for SUNY Albany.
Cool. Well,
Yeah,
cool, man.
a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah. Well, sounds like sounds like you got a lot on your plate between being a PhD and trying to manage a global community of idiots trying to. Yeah.
We'll just keep fudding. It works. No. All right, I do have to
Yeah.
round up.
All right, man. Cool. Thanks. See ya.
I'll catch you later. Bye.